You're writing your masterpiece and everything is chugging along just swell. Little do you know, lurking in the bushes between chapters, you've invited an assassin into your home. This assassin is slow, plotting, and relentless. His only goal? To derail the awesome story you've put together. Sometimes the subplots we brought into our story, or even just elements of another genre, are actively killing our work. Let's root out these assassins. Get ready for war. I'm DC Ferguson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. So, let's be clear, not all subplots are bad. It's actually a really gray area trying to find the ones that are, and this problem is exacerbated by the fact that Hollywood seems relentless in its pursuits of bad subplots that derail otherwise enjoyable movies, so you kind of notice it a lot less. Make no mistake about it though, if you have a subplot killing your story, you've invited it there. Like the title says, the call is coming from inside the house. Spooky. What I want you to do is take time to think about some of your favorite films. We're going to get into some egregious examples later, but right now, focus on just one film or book that you absolutely love. Now, was there a subplot in there that just seemed to drag the story down, even just a little bit? I'm not talking about making you hate the work as a whole. We're looking at this one element you could have done without. You know the one. It was that scene or chapter that made you say, damn, hurry up and get back to the story. I can't wait to see what happens. So, we're going to talk about some of the biggest, most obvious offenders. That would be kids, romance, comic relief, characters that do nothing, and storylines that don't affect the main plot. These are the secret assassins that ruin our awesome story. Fear not. We have a particular set of skills and we're going to use them. It's mostly just called the eraser and the delete key. Now, don't get me wrong. Kids and adult stories, like this kid right here, can be freaking awesome. Sometimes, the main characters can even be kids, and that's cool too. Also, children aren't the only ones we're talking about in here, but they're the most common offender. The reason for this is twofold. Writers like ourselves, we're smart and savvy. We don't fall into traps like these, right? Wrong. Children in a story are exceptionally difficult to write believably. Multiply that by a factor of 2 if you don't even have any of your own. The reason for this is that it can be very difficult to look backwards with adult sensibilities at the way that you acted as a child. Don't believe me? Get up, right now, and flail around and play for the next 10 minutes. I'll wait. Oh wait, you're not going to? You don't remember how to play with the attention span of a fly and the floor is lava? I think I made my point here. Children in stories have a tendency to be overwritten. They're either too smart or too dumb. So, you end up with super genius prodigies that need defending, or you have this goofball that keeps making one bad decision after another that requires saving them, which never would have happened if they had just listened in the first place. Part of the eye rolls that this induces is believability. Now, the master of Kung Fu and friendship was a wee tot once, and even though his brazen monkey style could have waylaid any number of intruders to his nursery, if my mom told me stay here, it's dangerous, I listened. You know why that never happens in a story? Because obedient children don't need saving in a 10-minute action set piece, that's why. And trust me, no matter how cool your action set piece is, a huge contingent of our audience is tired of this trope. So you end up with reactions like, yeah, that scene was cool, but what if it wouldn't have happened if the kid wasn't that dumb? We don't want reactions like this. Why? Because they're analyzing our choices. They're dissecting your story. You've failed to suspend disbelief. In short, you've shamed your family and your dojo. So, good example, bad example. Let's start with the good, and that's the 1994 cult hit The Crow, based on the comic book of the same name. The plot centers around Eric Draven. On the 1-year anniversary of the brutal murder of Draven and his fiancée Shelley, he returns for one night to exact revenge on the killers with the power of regeneration that makes him almost unkillable. Where the kid comes in is Sarah, a young girl from a broken home with a single mother. See, Eric and Shelley cared for this girl when they were alive. Without them, she's had no one. The reason this is so deftly handled is Sarah is way out of her league. She can't help Eric in any way with his mission. But she's also the last tie to his humanity left. The only other things in this world he cared about are gone. In that regard, she's a tiny beacon of light in a world of darkness where this main character lives. She keeps him human despite the horrible things he does. Scenes with her, though, completely removed from the main revenge plotline, are for character development and never a drag on the story. Now, for the bad, we're going to talk about the entire Jurassic Park series. Yeah, the whole franchise. It's weird because the first film came out when I was a kid, and you bet your sweet Bippy, the master of Kung Fu and friendship, was there on opening night with his whole family. But this series is one that does not age well for a number of reasons. But as it pertains to our example here, we're constantly having kids at the center of subplots in these films. So, if you took away all the other critiques about the movies, such as how irresponsible it is that a mad scientist billionaire went full Island of Dr. Moreau and recreated not just some dinosaurs, but all the dinosaurs, including the crazy killer ones, or the fact that instead of decades of research to understand them, the first thing he wants to do is make a zoo and invite children to the meat-eating killer lizard show. Like, that won't end poorly. But I digress. If we take away all of that, we still have a movie hamstrung and sidelined by rescuing these kids every 5 minutes from the aforementioned crazy killer lizards. Imagine for a second if they're taken completely out of the plot. All of a sudden, we have room for some serious philosophical discussion about the ethics of bringing back extinct species, long periods to study the dinosaurs and enjoy their majesty. Instead, we jump from one action set piece to another, always trying to flee a zoo run amok. Which, by the way, how many times does this have to happen before someone says, nah, let's just nuke the island and be done with this stupid idea already? When we're talking about romance in a story, it's wonderful. Love is a beautiful thing, except when it's more like a Psycho X chopping up the narrative in your story. This can happen for a number of reasons, and it affects each genre differently. For example, in an action film like Speed, which is an awesome pulse-pounding tension ride that I absolutely love, the romantic angle actually derails the final act a little bit. Let's be honest about the realism here. At what point does a cop, charged with trying to save a bus full of people, have time to turn on his lovey button, while dealing with the madman that has a bomb strapped to the bus? The main reason to that romantic angle at the end was the fact that Sandra Bullock has to appear and switch over to a damsel in distress trope in the third act, once they're off the bus. It's weak writing. You could even make the argument that their shared experience, coupled with the fact that the bad guy is still on the loose, is enough reason for our hero to go and save her without any romantic interest at all. He's just a swell guy. You see what I'm saying? Let's talk about comedy for a second, because, oh god, modern comedy films are loaded with romantic derails. Using two pretty recent examples for this one, there's a huge difference between Trainwreck and Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. Trainwreck is a romantic comedy. There's no mistaking what you're signing up for when you sit down to watch it. Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle shows off big laughs and strange juxtapositions, but it suffers from the same fate as many comedies these days, where romance is hastily shoved into the third act because, just like in real life, traumatic and difficult events is how most people do fall in love over the course of a 2-hour period and live happily ever after. That's the biggest problem with romance, really. When it escapes outside of its own genre, it's very difficult to get it to feel organic and believable. Oftentimes it's used as a crutch to raise the stakes for our protagonist, either as a supreme power of love to defeat the antagonist, or a damsel in distress to rescue. Since there are so many countless examples of this done wrong that we could probably rattle off the top of our heads, let's instead look at an example where romance leaves its genre and comes out awesome instead. And for that, we're going to look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a film about a married couple on the rocks about to call it quits on their relationship. But when they find out that they're actually on opposite sides of two secret assassin organizations, they get assigned to take each other out. At first, they go for it full steam trying to kill each other, and as the film progresses and their organizations come after the both of them, reignites their marriage, and the team-up is the only solution to both their problems. It's funny, it's full of action, centered on their romance. Juggling 3 different genres, it actually handles each of them with a keen sense, giving just enough of each to make everybody happy. So it's a perfect date movie. Go watch it with somebody you like, and tell them that the master of Kung Fu and friendship told you to. If you've been watching my videos for a while now, I'm pretty sure you know exactly where I'm going to go with this, so I'll keep it brief. We touched on this in the last video about pacing and tone, but to reiterate, comedy washes the palate of the audience clean. It should be used sparingly unless you're actually writing a comedy. For me, it was the exact opposite when I wrote the Wicked Instruments series. I was specifically making sure that the serious parts don't get in the way of all the fun we're having. So it kind of goes both ways. Anywho, whether we're in action, fantasy, crime, or drama, humor does have its place. That place is usually as a spacer, a break in the action where we want to dial down the tension to our audience. Here's the reason why, new and improved, with more charts. There's a phenomenon called power creep. It's usually a term reserved for gaming, but I feel like it applies here. If we've just started out with our intro with a huge action-packed set piece, we need to do one of two things. The next chapter needs to immediately double down on the action, so it needs to be bigger, badder, and faster than the last one. The reason for that is that audience response gets used to sensory input at a certain rate. This is true of all of our senses. You want to see it in action? Grab a book you have laying nearby, a big old heavy one. Now, rest it on your arm for a minute while I explain this. When you first put the book there, your brain registers the pressure as, dang, this book is heavy. But the longer you leave it there, the less you notice it. Now, stack up another book on top of it. See how you just noticed it again? Audience response to stimulus always works like this. The way that we make sure we don't have to keep topping ourselves one scene after another is to give a pause, a break in the action, a quick joke or some brevity to lighten the mood. This way, the next chapter doesn't have to carry the weight of the previous chapters because we're basically starting over. The lesson here is that we don't want sidekicks to our Judge Dredd. As serious a character as he is, having a comic relief sidekick derails every scene he's in because he's always got something to say that breaks up our action. And that is how you make a point and an example in one shot. Go me. To be fair, this problem might not just be an issue with the subplot you're running. Every character in your story should have some kind of an arc that reaches a natural conclusion. And yes, that conclusion can be walking alongside the protagonist into the sunset for a happily ever after. It could be because they die on us, or it could be that they've served their purpose and exit the story for the last time. It's the intervening times that we're talking about now, though. The spaces in your story where a character appears, we need to know that they belong there. There's a couple of ways we can handle this, so I'm going to walk through a hypothetical example to help visualize it first. So, let's say our main character is going to a local convenience store for milk. On this fateful night at the store, he finds his ex is working there. She has a coworker with her. An uncomfortable tension ensues, which we're using for character development between them. Now, this coworker is not going to play a role in your story at all. You've only put the person there to make it that your convenience store feels more populated and more real. So how are we handling this person from a writing perspective? What I would suggest you consider is write them the exact same way that you would verbally tell me a story involving an interaction between you and a stranger. In that regard, you're usually only going to give me surface details. You don't know this person's name. You're going to refer them as this guy or that lady, or you're going to give them a snarky nickname like Meat Sweats or something. You're not going to describe to me their whole outfit. You're not going to tell me much about their appearance at all, except for maybe surface stuff like this old dude, and so forth. Your writing should be equally standoffish. What we're trying to do is avoid what's happening in our example here, which is T-Dog from The Walking Dead. His character appeared from episode 1 of the series all the way until his death in season 3. His character is directionless. He has no arc, no backstory, appears to just be along for the ride, and he participates in the story that everyone else is on but has no stake in it himself. The problem with this character was so bad that in the episode where he dies, I hadn't recalled seeing him in the past few episodes and actually forgot he was still alive on the show. How bad is that? If you fail to successfully craft your characters to be people, first and foremost, then they're not characters at all. Worse yet, if they're not serving the story, but you've kept them in there anyway, you're bogging down your own writing by having to constantly remember to include them in conversations, remind the reader that they're there, or shoehorn them into scenes. The easiest way to avoid this problem? You guessed it, cut them all together. So, our last assassin is really hard to find. See, this one is deceptive and shady. The closer you look at it, the more invisible it becomes. The only way to spot this assassin is when you zoom out real far away in the place where you can see the whole story start to finish. Once we have that big picture, we're looking with a very critical eye, and it can be a little bit easier to spot. The problem we're talking about is pointless subplots. These are arcs in your story that literally go nowhere. They neither move nor enhance the plot, and in the grand scheme of things, if we cut them out, it would not affect the outcome of the story at all. As a matter of fact, it may make your story better by cutting out the nonsense. What am I talking about? Well, let's jump to examples. Here we have the kid, who appears in The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions. He thinks Neo is the coolest in the world ever, and follows him around, wanting to be involved. Every single time he pops up, he's this annoying fanboy that drags down the scene that he's in. The pinnacle of his character arc is in Revolutions. As the human city Zion is being attacked by the machines, he blows open the dock gates to give our heroes a fighting chance. The only problem is that with this war in Zion, it's actually resolved by Neo, far from Zion, inside the Matrix. So we see the kid pop up multiple times, and in his moment to shine, he does this big heroic thing that doesn't mean anything to the outcome of the story whatsoever. If you cut every one of his scenes from the film, removing him as a character altogether, nothing in these two films would play out any different. Not one bit. The lesson here is engage with your subplot and ask a very critical question. Can my story live without it? If the answer is yes, cut and cut mercilessly. Otherwise, you'll find yourself proudly declaring how important a character is that you couldn't be bothered to name or refer to as anything more than the kid. Now, what if I told you that there was a world where you could include every single thing I just mentioned, and not only avoid screwing up the story, but make a cult favorite out of it? And what if I told you that there was an example where you could use every single one of these and make a disastrous, incoherent, moronic film, but make $1 bajillion doing it? Well, I made you wait, but it is deep cut time. And this time we're looking at the 1985 comedy Better Off Dead. Long before Family Guy was rocking the dreamlike segues for a fast-paced, humorous scene, this movie nailed it. The film revolves around our protagonist Lane, who dreams of being a top-level skier. When his girlfriend dumps him for the captain of the ski team, Lane's life goes into a tailspin until a French foreign exchange student moves in next door. So, we have our protagonist and antagonist. We have like a pseudo-sports movie going on. Now check this out. We have a kid's subplot in here, and it's never not funny when he's in there. We have romance, but it doesn't feel shoehorned into the plot, yet this is not a romantic comedy. It has action, sure, but it's wall-to-wall laughs even in the action sequences. Every character in this movie reaches a satisfying conclusion, even the ones with the fewest lines in the film, and there are absolutely no subplots in the conclusion that are not wrapped up. As far as comedies go, this movie holds up even today thanks in part to the acting chops of a very young John Cusack and his relationship with the beautiful French foreign exchange student Monique. Find it, watch it, laugh and love it. It's easily one of my top 5 comedies ever. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm going to tell you something you already know. Michael Bay's Transformers movies suck. Why? Annoying kids, romance, comic relief where it doesn't belong, pointless characters, and pointless subplots. And I think that about sums it up. I'd say watch the movies if you don't believe me, but I really wouldn't suggest putting yourself through that. An intriguing subplot can add rich flavor to your work and enhance your overall story. Sometimes a subplot can be so good it even overshadows the main storyline. Aragorn and Lord of the Rings. What is important to realize is that when you have a great subplot in your story and you're packing on the word count, don't drag down the pace with a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. Check out the links in the description box down below. You can sign up for my newsletter, get all the latest goings-on with the Dragon's Dream saga, help out the Master of Kung Fu and Friendship by hitting that like and subscribe button to hear about new videos. And as always, I'm DC Ferguson. Now have fun and get crafting.